Good morning students. So today we can discuss about different components of turnout. And this figure shows the constants of turnout. So as I have told in the last class, the combination of points and crossing together is known as turnout. Okay, so in turnout there will be mainly two components, points and crossing. Okay, and these points are also known as switches, and this is crossing. So we can discuss one by one, and these are the component parts of a turnout, that is together with points and crossing. There is a pair of tongue rail, stalk rail, check rail, lead rail, a V crossing, slide chair, stretcher bar, pair of heel blocks, switch tie plate or gauge, then parts for operating points like rods, cranks, levers, etc. Then locking system, which include locking box, locking bar, plunger bar, etc. So I will explain each of these components. So turnout means it will be having points and crossing. The two components of turnout are points or switches and crossing. So points means it consists of a pair of tongue rail with stalk rail, and the train which is diverting from the main track will negotiate these points first. First the train will reach the points. Okay, then through this crossing it is diverted to the next track. So that first part is known as points. Next is the crossing. So a crossing is a device introduced at a junction where two rails cross each other to permit the wheel flange of a railway vehicle to pass from one track to another. So by this crossing the train is diverted to the next track. Okay. So these two components together known as turnout, points and crossing. So the first component of turnout is points or switches. So the components of switches are: a set of points or switches consist of the following main components, that is a pair of stalk rail and a pair of tongue rail. So these are the two main components of a point. Okay, and this tongue rail is also known as switch rail, and it is made of medium manganese steel to withstand the wear. So I will explain this by showing one figure. Okay, so this figure shows the switches or points. Okay, and this switch mainly consists of tongue rail and stalk rail. Okay, so this is known as stalk rail, that is a pair of stalk rail AB. This is the AB and CD. Okay, so there is a pair of stalk rail, and here in this figure it is stalk rail AB and stalk rail CD. Okay, so a pair of stalk rail AB and CD, and it is made of medium manganese steel. Okay, so that is one of the main important component of switch. So next is a pair of tongue rail, that is PQ. This is the tongue rail, this PQ and RS. Okay, and this tongue rail is also known as switch rails, and it is made of medium manganese steel to withstand the wear and tear. Okay, so here the tongue rail or switch rail is PQ and RS. Okay, and it is made of medium manganese steel in order to withstand the heavy load which is coming over the rail. And these tongue rails are machined to very thin section. That is, this tongue rail, from this figure it is clear that this tongue rail is machined to a very thin section. Here it is very thin section comparing to our stalk rail. At this point it is very thin. That is, it is a machine to a very thin section to obtain or in order to have a fit within the stalk rail. In order to have fit towards the stalk rail, it is machined to very thin section, and the tapered end of the tongue rail is called the toe. Okay, so this tapered end of tongue rail is known as toe, and the thicker end is known as heel. Okay, so this is heel and this is toe of a tongue rail. So there is another figure showing tongue rail. So here this is the tongue rail. From this figure it is clear that it is tapered as a thin section here. So this will be this tapered end, this will be toe, and the thicker end will be heel. Okay, so that's about stalk rail and tongue rail. And the next component is the a pair of heel block. So here there is a pair of heel block. This is the heel block, and it will hold the heel of the tongue rail, that is the heel of the tongue rail is held at the standard clearance or distance from the stock rail. That is, in order to have a standard clearance from the stock rail, that is there should be some clearance between the stock rail and tongue rail. So for that we are providing a heel block here. Okay, so a pair of heel block which hold the heel of the tongue rail, which hold the heel. This is the heel of tongue rail and this is the toe of tongue rail, that is the tapered part is toe and this is the heel. Okay, so the pair of heel block and it will hold the heel of the tongue rail is held at the standard clearance from the stock rail. So for that we are providing heel block. Okay, and the next component is a slide chairs. Okay, so this is slide chair, this component, this is known as slide chair. Okay, so it is clear, it is the slide chair. And number of slide chairs are provided in order to support the tongue rail, and also it enables its movement towards or away from the stock rail. Okay, so that is the function of slide chair. A number of slide chair is provided in order to support the tongue rail, and also it will enable the movement of this tongue rail towards and away from the stock rail. So that is the function of this slide chair. Okay, there are a number of slide chair. And next component is a stretcher bar. So I think in this figure there is no stretcher bar, it is not marked, so we can take another figure here. Okay, here this is the stretcher bar. Okay, the stretcher bar, two or more stretcher bars connecting both the tongue rail close to the toe, and it is provided to hold them at a fixed distance from each other. That is, in order to have a fixed distance between these two tongue rail, we are providing a stretcher bar. Okay, so that is the function of stretcher bar. That is, two or more stretcher bars are connecting both the tongue rails close to the toe for the purpose of holding them at a fixed distance from each other. Okay, so like this we are providing stretcher bar. Then there will be a gauge type plate. So that is okay, here this is the gauge type plate, and this is provided to fix the gauges and ensure correct gauge at the point. So in order to have correct gauge at that point, we are providing gauge type plate. So what is gauge? Gauge is the inner distance between two rails. So in order to maintain the correct gauge at the points, we are providing gauge type plate. Okay, so these are the main components of a switch or point. Okay, so a number of slide chairs to support the tongue rail and enables its movement towards or away from the stock rail. That is, these are the slide chair. Then two or more stretcher bars are connecting both the tongue rails close to the toe for the purpose of holding them at a fixed distance from each other. Then a gauge type plate is provided to fix the gauges and ensure correct gauge at the points. So these are the components of switches: pair of stock rail, tongue rail, heel block or distance block, stretcher bar, then switch type plate or gauge type plate, then slide chair or sliding plate, then it is repeated, that is gauge type plate. Okay, so these are the main components of switches. It's another figure showing this is switch and this is crossing. So the second component of our turnout is crossing. Okay, so a crossing or fog is a device introduced at the point where two gauge faces cross each other to permit the flanges of a railway vehicle to pass from one track to another. So it's a device in order to have in order to divert a train from one track to another. So that path is known as, or that setup is known as crossing. A gap is provided from throat to the nose of the crossing so that it can deviate. And the check rails ensure correct movement and guides the wheels properly. Here also we are providing check rail to assure the correct movement and guide the wheels properly to the correct direction. Okay, so this shows crossing. So the first component of crossing, that is there is two rails, that is point rail. Here it is point rail, it is shown point rail, and splice rail. Okay, so this point rail and splice rail, these are machined to form a nose. Okay, and this is known as actual nose of crossing, ANC. This is the actual point, the toe of the blunt nose, the correct point, or the in practically this is the point where this splice rail and point rail joins, and this point is known as actual nose of crossing. Okay, but theoretically these two will intersect at this point. Okay, so the theoretical point where the gauge faces from both sides intersect is known as theoretical nose of crossing. Okay, so this splice rail and point rail are machined to form a nose. So this is the first component of our crossing. So the next component is wing rails. That is, here there are two wing rails, that is left hand wing rail and right hand wing rail. So these two wing rails will converge. These two wing rails, that is right hand wing rail and left hand wing rail, that will converge to form a throat. These two will converge to form a throat. Okay, and then again it will diverge on either side of the nose. So this is a nose. So after converging it into the after converging this wing rails to form the throat, again it will diverge on either side of the nose. Okay, so the next second component of our crossing is wing rail. So there is left hand wing rail and right hand wing rail, and these two wing rail will converge to form a throat and diverge again on either side of the nose. Okay. Okay, so these are the main components of crossing, that is two wing rails consisting of right hand and left hand wing rail that converge to form a throat and diverge again on either side of the nose. Then these wing rails are flared at the ends to facilitate the entry and exit of the flanged wheel in the gap. So for that, in order to have a smooth entry and exit of the flanged wheel, it is flared. Okay, that is it is flared in this form. And a pair of check rails are used in order to guide the wheels. So these are the main components of crossing, and also splice rails and point rails are here. The splice rail and point rails are here to form nose. This is the nose, and it is the actual nose of crossing, and it is theoretical nose of crossing. So next is the type of crossing. Types of crossing. First one, acute angle crossing or V crossing. That is, in this type the intersection of the two gauge faces form an acute angle. That is here. This is the example of V crossing. That is, by in this type the two types of two gauge faces form an acute angle. So it is known as acute angle crossing or V crossing. That is, when right rail crosses a left rail, it makes an acute crossing. Thus, unlike rail crossing, form an acute crossing. So this is the example of acute crossing or V crossing. So this here the angle is acute angle. The next type is obtuse or diamond crossing. Here the two gauge faces meet at an obtuse angle. When the right or left rail crosses a similar rail, it makes an obtuse crossing. So it is known as diamond crossing or obtuse crossing. This is when two tracks crosses each other at less than 90 angle, then it forms a diamond shape. So it is known as diamond crossing. Then last one is square crossing. Here the two tracks cross at right angles. So and this such crossing are rarely used in actual practice. That is this is a square crossing. I think this is not much familiar type of crossing. Okay, it's rarely provided square crossing. That is, two tracks crossed at right angles. Okay, so these are the different types of crossings. That is, this is the diamond crossing. Okay, and this is V crossing, and it is square crossing. So these are the components of turnout. That is, turnout mainly consists of points or switches and crossing. So we have discussed the elements of different components or elements of points and different components or elements of crossing. So in exams, if they are asked to explain the different components of points or crossing, you should draw that figure and mark different components and explain. Okay. So thank you.